Okay, so I'm in Drink Hebden Bridge, and I'm already learning that I should have started the camera. I mean, walked straight in here because I'm here with Charlie the Bike Monger and James, I think, and the legendary Charlie Kelly. Come here to see him talk about his book, The Repack and the Birth of Mountain Biking, the Fat Tire Flyer. Absolutely fantastic, top quality. But I've only had to flick through a couple of pages, but just the sheer quality of this thing is superb. But if we're going to talk about sheer quality, then Charlie needs to tell you. Well, I'm just going to throw some questions at him, and Charlie's going to just keep talking, I reckon.
Just set me up.
Here you go, Charlie. Okay. Right. That should be enough scratching and squeaking on. Tell him I'm writing, and I'll film the producer. Okay, put it like that. There's less distraction going on.
We'll fix it in post-production.
Okay. Yeah. Fix it in post. So, you were just saying you go through like a whole bunch of situations with people going, oh, you know, we did that before you. But you were clarifying that you were the guys who put a clock on it.
Yes,
you were saying.
you know, I mean, like I say, the French guys in Paris in the 50s, you know, I mean.
In the bomb holes.
Right, and in fact, the whole thing started from me and Gary. We just had town bikes because we both had expensive race bikes, and you don't really, you know, go out for beer on those, you know. Yeah. And so we put. Gary had a collection of old bike parts when he moved into the house with me, and the great thing about those then 40-year-old bikes, now 80-year-old bikes, but was that they're all pretty much interchangeable. You know, all the wheels would fit any frame, and
so the Cruiser was kind of a standard.
Right. So yeah, I mean, if you had a pile of parts that added up to a bike, you could probably assemble one. And so Gary and I just assembled a couple of one-speed balloon tire, essentially just old bikes, you know, and used them for our town bikes. And one day, one of our friends said, "Hey, remember when we were kids and we rode our bikes out on the trails?" I mean, once again, hearkening back to something 20 years earlier than that. And so, hey, he said, throw the bikes in the truck, we'll take them up on the hill, and we'll ride a trail like we did when we were kids.
Yeah.
Right. In other words, so we weren't doing anything different than we'd done, you know, years earlier. But we were doing it as adults. And we actually only had 2 bikes and 3 guys, so we just switched off, and one guy would run and the other 2 would ride. And because it was kind of a gentle uphill slope, you know, the guy on foot could keep up.
Yeah.
And then at one point we said, okay, well, that's enough, and we turned around, and that's when we realized that, wow, was it really this much fun coasting downhill when we were kids? Because I didn't remember that part, you know, but you know, but it was certainly more fun coasting downhill on an old $15 worth of junk bike than it was chasing your friend while he did that, you know. Yeah. So I mean, running behind him. So Gary and I assembled a bike for the third guy, right?
Yeah. And so who was the third guy?
His name was Fred, and he was a guy who'd been in grade school with me. I'd known the guy for probably 17, 18 years by then. And so it kind of became a thing, and you know, one speeds and just town bikes. But at one point, these guys showed up from out of town to a cyclocross event, and they had put derailleur gears on their old cruisers. They had bikes similar to ours, and Gary was in the race. There's a photograph of Gary staring at this bike, you know, that this guy showed up with. And a month or 2 later, Gary shows up with, he finds at a flea market a disassembled tandem. He bought the thing and threw everything away but the rear hub, which was a big, it was a Maxicar, and enormous, probably weighed 7 or 8 pounds by itself, you know, but it had a drum brake on it. And that was the difference, because we'd been riding coaster brakes, and you can't put a derailleur gear on that. So, and he assembled a derailleur system on his old cruiser. Once again, he probably added 7 or 8 pounds to the bike.
Yeah.
But
he
the next time we went on a ride, well, he could still ride uphill, and we're all pushing, you know. And so over the next year and a half or so, well, I mean, I watched it happen, and we had friends whose were second generation bike shop. We'd go there and order anything we needed, you know. And so they ordered up some tandem hubs, a little more modern than the one Gary had, and over the next year and a half, a lot of the guys in our club added derailleur gears to their old cruisers. And now that these bikes have more range, we started taking more rides on more hills because, suddenly you
literally
these, you can actually, now you get these things up a hill.
And now it's not just a pub bike or a play bike.
Right,
it's
right.
Something you can explore on.
Something originally for a mile or two down to get beer and come back, But and then this friend of mine, Fred, actually the same guy, he had a motorcycle, and one day we kind of poached some fire roads, and the way he got into it, he was driving, so I just sitting on the back, but we went up this really, really steep hill, and it got us immediately right into like this backcountry, And we took just followed the road, and eventually came back to where we'd started, and we came back down that hill, and we thought, well, that's a pretty good loop, and that year, that would be 1975.
Yeah.
We thought we have a big American holiday, Thanksgiving Day, and there's a big meal at the end of that day, right?
Yep.
And so I don't know whose idea it was, but hey, let's take a big, tough ride on our bikes around this route that my friend and I had explored, and we'll work up an appetite, and just for the dinner. And like I said, it finished coming down this very, very steep hill, and with the coaster brakes, the guys that still had coaster brakes, some of them still did.
Yeah.
They cooked that brake so badly that you know the story, right?
And
you had to repack the hub with grease, and so that's how it acquired the name. But like I say, as the rides, more and more people had these converted bikes. We'd go on these rides, and every ride starts to ride up something, right? Doesn't even matter where you are, because towns are in valleys and ridges on both sides, and so whatever dirt road you pick, you ride up it, and at some point you run out of up and you're on top of something, and nobody just says okay and turns around, because for one thing, you're exhausted, and so the bikes would get thrown down, and the water bottles and the frisbees and the lunch, whatever, but you'd hang around for a while.
Yeah.
And but this curious phenomenon emerged, and that is, at some point, somebody would look at his bike. I mean, at some point you got to go downhill, right?
Yeah.
Well, what triggers that? Well, what happens is that somebody would look at his bike, and then suddenly everyone's running for their bike.
So it's like an informal Le Mans start.
And exactly. And you didn't have to say, well, say, fellas, why don't we risk our lives on $15 worth of junk and for an undeclared race with nothing to win? Sounds good, know. But this fellow Fred was also 6'4", 220 pounds, by far the biggest guy in our crew.
Yeah.
And maybe not the most humane of the people in the crew. If he got in the front, it's worth your life to try to pass him, And as you know, even on a dirt road that might be 10, 15 feet wide, there's really the line you want is a foot line.
I've ridden that Repack, and it's not easy.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, you understand that really the best line. I mean, it wasn't always Repack; it was whatever hill you're on. The best line is one bike wide.
Yep.
And it's really hard to come around a guy who's already on the best line.
Yeah.
And especially if he's mean and big.
Especially if you haven't got a lot of spare braking power or a lot of spare. You've got pretty much minimal tire grip as well.
Right. So, and we discussed everything to death, because a lot of the time you'd be pushing the bike up the hill, even with the gears, and when you're sitting around on top of that hill, you'd be discussing everything, and we talked about it. I don't know how long we talked about it, but because we were road racers, we understood the concept of a time trial.
Yep.
And as you know, they call that the race of truth.
Yeah.
Because what the other guys are doing has no bearing on what you're doing.
Yeah.
And
it means Fred doesn't get in the way.
Well, that's right. And Fred, is a big man, and took up a lot of road, and there was a lot of smack talking going on.
Yeah.
And I said, well, okay, guys, I figured out a timing system, and the timing system was 2 coordinated clocks, right?
Yeah.
And the clocks were stuff we had. One was like an alarm clock, wind up an alarm clock, but had a second hand.
Yeah.
And the other was actually a pretty good one, a Navy chronometer that would be a pretty accurate timepiece. The other one you never know, but but as long as it's using the same clocks for everybody, it's fair enough. You know?
Yeah.
And so, and it's funny, it was the 42nd anniversary, 2 days ago, because Regan Everson pointed that out.
Yeah.
But October 21st, 1976, that was the day that we were going to find out for all time
that was the
which
throwdown.
one of our 7 or 8 people, you know, was the fast one, you know, and so I put on this race, and it found out something else. You know, if you the football season is what, I don't know, 12, 15 games. I don't know how long they play, but a bunch of games, right?
Yeah.
Well, all the guys that lost the first game would like to play another one.
Yeah. Pretty damn soon.
Because they'd like to win one.
Yeah.
You know, and so okay, this guy won. Going to happen. And he said, okay, well, that's decided now. I am the universal champ for all time of the universe of this wacky thing that we do, which is kind of a goofy hobby, right? And once again, everybody that didn't win said, well, actually, the sun got in my eyes. You got lucky, you know. But but everyone who didn't win wants a shot at the title.
Yeah, for sure.
The guy who did win said, wait a minute, I thought we decided something, you know, and so his options were, well, you can retire undefeated, or you can defend. You know.
Yeah. Bring it on.
And 5 days later, we're back up on that hill.
Yeah.
And actually, I have all the results from the second race on. I mean, the first one was so goofy and unimportant that who cares, you know? But and I think we had 7 participants for the second race.
Yeah.
And then 4 days after that, we're back up on the hill. It's like this thing took over our lives with lightning speed.
Yeah.
I mean, because it turns out that even losing that race was all right. You know, because man, what you got what you're looking for, which is man, Fred's not in front of me. You know, and
serious thrill.
And as adrenaline sports go, well, for one thing, this hill, you've been on Repack.
Yeah.
You know it.
Yeah. I've got scars. I've got scars from Repack.
Right. Well, that, you know, and from a technical standpoint, no, anybody could ride that hill.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it's not. It doesn't begin to approach what a modern downhill course looks like.
No, but it draws you in.
But as Gary Fisher always points out, it's not the course, it's the competition.
Yeah.
And if you're going to be faster than everybody else, you're going to find something that they didn't.
Yeah.
Did you put a clock on yourself?
No.
Okay.
No,
well,
I didn't. I must admit. No, I didn't.
But,
I did end up in a bush, though.
Oh, you
Somebody
did?
wiped out in front of me. I ended up in a bush.
is that the Specialized thing?
No, it was a Marin. It was a Marin launch
really?
about 10 years ago.
Because you know, some years ago, 10 years ago or so, Specialized actually rented the big camp there and brought in people from all over the country, and they had me lead a bunch of people up to Repack to kind of reproduce. I mean, they bought flannel shirts and jeans at the
I think that wasn't that like the Stump Jumper 25th.
Right,
or something
exactly,
like that? Yeah.
exactly. That was it. And ironically, Gary and Joe and the other guys, well, they don't get to come to this stuff because they represent commercial interests, and I don't. And so I get the invitation, and the other people don't. But anyway, I gave them the lecture, and the lecture is always the same. Guys, you're not going to set the course record today. Don't even try. Because, okay, you have been on the course, and you know that first 200 yards or so, you're saying, what's the deal?
Yeah.
And then it falls off the edge of the table.
Yeah.
And it falls off camber, and if you actually don't know about that turn, you got to actually, it's counterintuitive which side of the road you want to be on.
Yeah.
And the guys that had ridden before know that, man, don't go with your instincts, go with what you remember.
Yeah.
And man, a lot of people eat it right there because they think that fairly easy stuff puts them to sleep.
Yep.
They think, what is the deal?
What's the challenge? Yeah. And then all of a sudden you're in too deep.
And then you go off the edge of the table and it's off camber and it's really soft and it's really rocky. And if you had not been through that turn before, your instincts lead you the wrong way.
Yeah.
And so, man, a lot of people did. Really.
And when you can't tighten it up. Once you're in and on the
right,
wrong line. That's what happened to the guy in front of me who took me out.
This thing just became obsessive for us.
Yeah.
And of course, after, I don't know, the fourth race, I realized, well, I guess we're going to keep doing this.
Yeah.
I went to a sporting goods store and I said, I need stopwatches, 2 stopwatches. And only thing I'd ever seen was a wind-up thing with a button on the top,
yep.
you know, and the guy goes, man, check this out. It came in today. My timing was perfect. Digital times to 100th.
Wow.
I said, I need 2 of those. Okay, and they were pretty expensive, $150 in 1976. I don't know what the equivalent with the exchange rate and inflation and so forth, but I would imagine it'd be 300 quid right now, something like that. And
so right from the start, even though it starts with junkyard bikes, it's starting to. I mean, you're now looking at the 5th run,
right?
And it's getting expensive.
Well, I mean,
it's getting competitive.
It was competitive from the start, but
in
fact, suddenly guys from other towns. I mean, we knew that there were some the guys, we called them, they were the Larkspur Canyon gang, and these guys, they'd been shredding the mountain for a couple of years before we even started.
Were they the guys who turned up at the cyclocross race?
No, those guys were the Cupertino boys.
Right.
And they were from they were from a part of the world. Cupertino was like 50 miles from us. I mean, we weren't even aware of these guys. But they'd done Le Mans start races of their own. But once again, the mass start has problems. You know, the most aggressive rider, maybe not the best rider, but the most aggressive is rewarded. And so, and that's what we're finding, that, you know, what if we took aggression out of the mix? You know, and made skill the
defining factor.
Factor. Yeah. So, although I love those guys. I give them total props. You know, because they had figured out something we hadn't, which was how to put a derailleur on one of these old bikes. But we have one of those old bikes in the Mountain Bike Hall of Fame. Yeah. And you can see that these guys, they were already concerned about the braking, because the bike we have actually has 2 brakes on the rear wheel. He has a drum brake and a rim brake, 2 levers on the right side. Right. I mean, and a drum brake front. Yeah. But I mean, they were already realizing that the braking is really a problem. But anyway, so, and then suddenly these guys started showing up from Berkeley, and you know the geography. Berkeley is about 15, 20 miles away from us. And, I mean, they had their own hills that they've been riding. I mean, everybody did this before we did. But putting the clock on it changed the world, you know, and keeping score. And I have all the results from then on. And so
do you ever look back and like tell me, is this a question someone asked me to ask you when I once said online I was meeting you? It's just like, do you ever look back and go, bloody hell, what did I do? And also a question somebody else did. At one point, did you look back and go, how did this get to this?
Well, you know, if you read the book, and you will, one thing leads to another, and you can actually trace the sequence of events that led to more modern mountain biking, and certainly had a hand in a lot of those. Yeah. So, from a logical standpoint, yes, I understand that I had a hand. Once again, I don't know whether it created something or not. From an emotional standpoint, it's really hard to accept that I could do anything that would affect so many people, and in a more or less positive way. You know, I mean, and so there are 2 ways of looking at it. Emotionally, it's like, no, I can't. Hard to say that I could do this, you know. But logically, yes, I can trace step. I think most
people would put you in the picture as the guy who did.
And I have a lot of firsts. You know, I put on the race. Then Gary Fisher and I were the first people to really market this concept.
And, market it as a sport, market it as a team sport.
About the bikes.
The bikes.
And
also make it professional. Make selling mountain bikes professional as well. Not just something you cook. You know, not something you cooked up in your backyard.
Once again, we stumbled into it, and the whole way that took place was in 1978, Joe Breeze had finished my bike and a few others. I mean, he made 10 bikes.
Yeah.
And I had one, and we took those bikes out to Colorado to try them out in the Rocky Mountains, which are real mountains compared to ours.
Yeah.
Now, Gary, he joined us, but he was still riding his old cruiser. And we came into Aspen after riding the most incredible, roughest trail we'd ever in our lives seen. And Gary snapped that handlebar right off his 40-year-old bike, you know. And you know, he was already winning Repack on that 40-year-old bike, but it was a real message, man. These bikes are not. Yeah. They're not modern bikes, you know, and they're not as rugged as anything new, you know, and because the bars on my bike were Renthal motorcycle bars. I was not going to snap those off. And but the bike that I had, Joe Breeze, had taken my money, and then 8 months before I got a bike. And one of the reasons is that Joe had to design a bike from scratch rather than you know, a road bike. You buy a book on how to build a road bike, but and all the geometry stuff is well known, and you can buy the lugs and all the tubes plug right in. But first, Joe had to learn how to weld tubing lugless, you know, because the geometry was totally different, and he wanted to use larger tubes. And Joe's a very careful guy. He'd never been early to anything in his life, he spent a month on the drawing board before he ever cut any tubing. And so, because Joe had made some bikes, but that wasn't his profession, it was just he's a very skilled guy. And Gary Fisher didn't want to, you know, wait long enough for a guy who really didn't do it for a living. He went to a couple of guys who did do it for a living. One of those guys was Tom Ritchie. But Gary really hit his bet.
He was legendarily fast.
Right. But Gary actually went to 2 guys, a guy named Jeffrey Richmond also. And what he did was ordered 2 bikes from each because he knew 3 other people that were looking for bikes. And he figured, well, I'll get one, and there'll be 3 others, but whoever delivers first, that's what I'm riding. And Tom Ritchie had actually raced Repack before Gary even approached him. In fact, there's a photograph in the book. He's standing right behind me at a Repack race, but I hadn't been introduced to him. I didn't really get introduced for another 6 months. But Joe had said, come out and check out what we're doing here. You know, and so and he rode an old cruiser and rode it really well. But so Joe had built these bikes, but he's also talked to Tom Ritchie about, well, if I was going to do this again, I would change this and this and this, you know. And Tom Ritchie had seen the bikes and listened to Joe and had his own ideas, and Gary contributed his own ideas, and so legendarily fast. You're right, Tom. I don't know how long it took him to build a bike for Gary. Probably a week or 2, you know. And then he realized something very crucial to my personal history, which was that Tom he's just 22 years old. He says he had built 1,000 road bikes at that point. Now, I don't know that it's 1,000. He might be stretching a little bit, but it is hundreds and hundreds for sure. And every time you build a custom road bike, the guy comes to you with 8 pages of what he wants, because you can buy a pretty nice road bike in a shop. If you're coming to a custom builder, it's unique. You want something that isn't like what you buy in a shop, even though it's made by a guy just like the guy Tom Ritchie. But
you almost need to prove it's custom by having your own custom.
It's got to be different. And so every road bike that Tom built had to be, you know, unique. But then he realized, wow, first, I don't need the $150 double-bedded tube set. I can buy this same material in straight gauge, it's $1 a foot. So instead of $150 for the tube set, $20, right? Second, I don't have to make these things unique. Nobody's going to tell me how to build these things. And
I set the standard.
Joe's already provided the geometry that that he was going to use. And so, he built a bike for Gary and one for Gary's friend, and then he thought about it a while, and he whipped out 9 more because just didn't have anything to do that day, and just pretty easy to do and cheap enough to make. And then he found that where he lived, which is 50 miles from where Gary and I lived, no market. The only market for a bike like that was going to be in Marin County. And so I don't know how long those frames sat around, probably a month or 2, but he finally called Gary and said, hey, you found a guy to buy one of these, you know, could you find a couple more? Because I got these 9 frames and
Yeah.
I can't get rid of them, you know, and maybe you can. So
I could almost have stalled at that point.
Right.
That could have been like, Gary could have gone, nah, I'm too busy. Or
Right.
whatever.
Well, and that day, Gary finds me in town, and he said, Charlie, check this out, you know, and he opens the boot, you know, and there's these 9 frames.
In his old BMW, wasn't it, I think?
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
You're going to pass the test, you know, I can see that. Anyway, noisy enough. Anyway, and the quality is like my Italian race bike.
Yeah.
But see, because Tom worked lugless, he could stick any tubes together at any angle, and that was an advantage that most, even custom road builders, couldn't do, because everybody else just buys a set of lugs,
But that immediately restricts what you can do.
Exactly, because
the
the angles and the tube sizes are whatever those lugs are, and so Tom had that huge advantage and it didn't take him any longer to work lugless than apparently a guy using lugs. Anyway, so Tom realized that in the time and for the expense that it took to build one custom road bike, he could build 5 or 6 of these.
Yeah, and you can sell them for more.
Well, eventually, time, you know,
once,
you know, because they're rare enough, you could buy a road bike in a shop, you know. But I'm pretty sure he was getting pretty good money for his custom bikes. So he just whipped them out on spec, and Gary said, you know, hey, you want to sell these? And sure, I mean, 9 bikes, you know, and really at that point, that appeared to be the future. You know, I mean, well, let's get rid of these for Tom and maybe have some fun and get some of our friends on nice bikes, you know. And so we, you know, we pooled our cash, not much, a few $100, and went to the bank and opened an account to do these bikes. And they said, well, what's the name of your business? And I don't know which one of us said mountain bikes, but that was the name of the business. And we actually paid a guy to trademark that name. Should have saved the money, because we don't own it. But who gets to put a word in the dictionary, you know? And we did.
Who gets to invent something that's influenced so many people so positively?
You know,
it's not just a word in the dictionary.
Right,
I mean, I know you say you have a moral almost difficulty in saying that.
Well,
you know,
I don't
you're
say invent the mountain bike. It developed under my care.
You were a catalyst.
Right. Yeah, I guess so. You know, it's hard to pin down what the whole deal is, you know. But anyway, and really, once again, we didn't really see much beyond. Well, let's get rid of these 9 frames, you know, and it was. I mean, we had to go down to the bike shop and buy the stuff right over the counter. Now, what if you had to build a car, go to the auto parts place, and okay, I'll take some brakes, you know, and I'll need some time. I mean.
And we're not even talking like commonly available componentry, are you?
Well,
you're talking like
the guys,
a whole variety of, you know, like.
Well, I mean,
weird
the motorcycle shop was one of the stops of the motorcycle shop, and but by then we had some friends, the Koski Brothers.
Yeah.
Okay, the Koski Brothers were second generation bike shop. Their dad had opened a shop, toys and bikes. Well, the boys, after they were about 12, the toys didn't interest them, the bikes did, you know, and so the boys really. The bike shop expanded, the more the boys grew up, you know, and so they were our go-to guys because it was a bike shop where we could say, hey, could you order this stuff for us, you know, and so, I mean, we're still paying retail, but we could get stuff ordered through these guys, our friends, you know, and so, but really.
It's not just buying old 3-speed rallies just to get a saddle off them or anything
I did that once, but anyway, so, yeah, we could get the stuff, but we were paying pretty much retail for it, and so, I mean, you assembled a bike, and it cost you, you know, exactly what you were going to get for it, you know, and, but really, the object at first was just to make sure our friends had bikes, and we didn't really see it as, you know, I mean, we're thinking 9 bikes, and it might take us 6 months to get rid of these, but they went pretty quickly.
Sweet.
And Tom said, more, you know, and here's some more. And so we originally built them just in my house, you know, but then we had there was a garage for rent just a few blocks from my house, and it was cheap enough. I mean, we rented this place and moved. Gary had a really good set of bike tools in there, and we. I didn't really have much in the way of tools, but Gary had been a bike mechanic, shop mechanic, and he had a really good set of tools.
Yeah.
And we moved in there and started building bikes, and Gary is very very careful to say, look, Tom built frames, we built bikes, you know, and frame's not a bike, you know. But
yeah, it's interesting when you get Gary talking about Tom. That's quite interesting.
Well, those guys have a love-hate relationship without much love. But anyway, you know, the thing is, Gary and Tom and we shared an experience so profound, you know, that, man, I can't get over that, man. Gary and I have certainly had differences, but man, that experience was, who got to do that?
Yeah.
And I tell people I had the greatest bicycle adventure of the 20th century.
Yeah.
And maybe it's not true, but I'll certainly argue that side in the debate, you know, and I shared it with Gary. And there was a while, I mean, eventually we had employees, but at first it was just me, my former roommate and best friend, building the coolest bikes in the world. And we knew they were the coolest bikes in the world. Maybe the world wasn't on to that yet, but we do. And
I guess that's the crucial thing. If you believe it, you can sell it. And
the world, of course, caught up. The world, you can't stay. I mean, there's nothing secret about a bike. A good bike engineer could take a look, whip out the tape, and know exactly what you've done.
Yeah.
You know?
Someone who's already importing tires and shoes from Japan or something like that.
Well,
maybe sells his camper van.
But interestingly, we had to arrange for our. I mean, okay, you can't keep buying the stuff over the counter at the bike shop, so we started to look into, you know, where do you get the hubs and the rims
and the Magura brake lever and stuff like
that. And so, more importantly, the derailleurs and the brake sets, tandem brake sets. But it turns out that a lot of these places you can't order 4 or 5. You know, you got a minimum order of 20 whatever brake sets and so forth. And so we had to. It took us a while to sort out where to get the stuff, and because really, some of these suppliers look at us and say, "You guys have a hobby. You just like to indulge at wholesale," you know, and really wasn't a lot different from that.
Yeah.
You know, I mean,
so that's the kind of go big or go home moment.
Right. Well, hobby on steroids, really, and but we did get this stuff arranged, obviously, and we were fortunate enough that we started getting some publicity in publications, because this was so different from anything else that anyone had seen that it did attract publicity, and the publicity attracted customers, and the thing snowballed. And really, our business plan was, hey, you want to sell bikes? A business plan is not, hey, you want to sell bikes. A business plan is a flow chart, and you know, your area of responsibility, mine, where's the money coming from, where's it going, all that. But we didn't have any of that, and by day 2 of your business, it's already too late to put that in place. I mean, you know, and
it's already got momentum,
right? And like I say, we didn't really anticipate what we're going to be dealing with. You know, I mean, at first, well, let's see if we can sell these 9. You know, and so we were losing money pretty much from the start.
Right.
But the money we were losing was Tom Ritchie was taking $20 worth of material, turning it into something worth $400.
Yeah.
And that was capitalizing the company. But really, the problem is you're owing Tom more and more because you're plowing the money back into stuff. And really, that's really what sunk our company eventually, was the amount of money that we're owing our frame builder. And his problem was that we're his marketing arm.
Yeah.
If he cuts us off, that's a problem for him. It's a problem for everybody, and it was a very tense situation. Now, I mean, this is 3 years down the road, you know, but eventually that's what really took us apart. And by then we're churning out lots and lots of bikes, and losing money every day, you know. And so the money we're losing pretty much Tom's, you know. So
but
I mean,
I mean, because they're expensive bikes by this
Well, they
point,
were.
relatively
I mean,
expensive, but still not expensive enough, I guess.
The joke that Gary had was, hey, we're selling a $1,400 bike with $3 tires. You know, where's all the other money going to? You know.
Yeah.
But we did do something, I guess, relatively important, which was we came up with the design that really was the template for maybe the first 5 or 6 years of all mountain bikes. And because once the big companies, Specialized, Univega, and the others.
Yeah, because Univega actually sold more than Specialized.
Actually, Univega was
Univega
they had
their
first mountain bike out within days. I'm not sure which side of the Specialized stump jumper hit the market, but
and they outsold
but both bikes were designed by people who had bought bikes from us.
Yeah,
and so rather than, I mean, our bikes were the result of 4 or 5 years of experimentation and breaking a lot of things, but their R&D was buy one.
Yeah.
You know, and once again, like I say, a good bike engineer could just measure a few things and duplicate it for you. But that design certainly was the template for, you know, Diamondback and Mongoose and all the first entries into the mountain bike market. One thing I pointed out in a rival magazine, American magazine that I won't name for you, is that I see people riding around, original owners of a 87 Rockhopper, right, which was a relatively inexpensive clone of the Ritchie bike, right? Yeah. But the design is so perfect, rugged, straightforward, robust. All that guy did is oil the chain for 30 years. Yeah. And he's still riding that bike. And the irony is, the bike I'm riding, which if I had to pay for it, would cost a lot of money. I don't pay for my bikes. That's one of the perks of the deal. But it won't be useful in 30 years. You know, and that inexpensive Rockhopper, mass-produced version of a Ritchie mountain bike. Yeah.
It's still a really good workhorse bike.
And original owner and all of that. You know?
So are you disappointed in some ways in the way that mountain biking is developed in that way?
No, I mean, come on, everything's a surprise. I mean, and if I had to give away everything that's come down the pike, I'd keep the disc brakes because really everything, you know, the brakes were the weakest link forever.
Right from the start.
Right. And we were using obviously the biggest brakes, rim brakes on the market, tandem brakes with a really long arm, you know. Yeah. And we made our own brake cables so we could make them a thicker diameter brake cable so that less stretch. Wow. We used those motorcycle brake levers with a huge
the big
brake lever.
Ones.
Everything we could do to increase the leverage. But man, disc brakes are the deal, you know. Nothing that we could do approached that, you know. Yeah. So, but I am kind of softened up. I mean, a couple of years ago, I did a promotional event, and I rode a '87 Fisher Comp, which was really one of the nicest bikes of its era. Yeah. And I'm going, man, this thing's beating me to death. Did I really ride these? You know.
I think we've all got bikes we can remember riding.
Yeah, well, 6 inches of travel on my modern bike now, and funny thing is, man, I used to build bikes. I don't even know how to maintain this one, but fortunately now, when I go to the bike shop, the water's part, you know, and no big deal.
So where do you see it going? What do you think mountain biking will be like in 20, 40 years time from now?
I didn't see it. From the beginning, I didn't see where it was going. You know, I mean, it'd be unfair to ask me now because I'm so far from the cutting edge. You know, the irony is, the world is full of people who've grown, 2 generations who've grown up with full suspension mountain bikes. Yeah. And
those things are complex. I'm glad that I started riding and testing before full suspension was basically a thing. Because I got to learn it one little evolutionary step at a time. If you're jumping in now, there is so much going on.
The modern downhill course, I no longer have the skill set just to ride top to bottom. I mean, forget about it. I was 30 years old when I first put on that first downhill race, and so how good are you getting at any sport that you take up when you're already really past your athletic prime, you know? Yeah. And so now you got the kids that grew up with full suspension bikes. Yeah. They grew up being
They grew
encouraged.
up after the backflip.
Right, and ironically, as soon as the BMXers entered mountain biker, they brought a skill set that was completely alien to us. I mean, when John Tomac, basically a BMX champion,
BMX and trials,
entered mountain biking, he took it to a new level in a week. I mean, he brought a skill set that was just astonishing, you know, and of course, he was coming in at the age of 18 or 19, you know, okay. What about the kids that were racing mountain bikes when they're 10 now, you know, and full suspension and disc brakes and all that. So I have no idea where it's going. It's always surprising me, you know. But really, the Red Bull, I mean, come on. I met Josh Bender a few weeks ago. He was inducted in the Mountain Bike Hall of Fame. And man, there's a lot of video of this guy attempting like a 50-foot drop.
Oh, hell
I mean,
yeah.
And man, he fails the first 15 times, and every time he fails, well, first he's got to go heel up, and then he's got to repair the bike, you know. And I mean, I'm going like, man, why didn't you quit after 2, you know? But he's taken it to a level that actually I've written a satirical article about that. When now the first suspended bikes I saw were actually in the mid '80s. Or early 80s. Brian Skinner and Dan Hannebrick both had suspension bikes in the early 80s. And I wrote a kind of a satirical piece about like riding them off of cliffs. Well, you know,
it's not satire anymore.
You can't stay ahead of reality anymore. You know, and so the Red Bull thing. I mean, I didn't see that coming. That's for sure. So, now, jumping a 50-foot gap, well, if you don't do it with the backflip, who are you? You know?
Exactly. Why do you even show up?
Right. So, I'm not the guy to ask where the future is, you know.
Well, I'll let Charlie, I know you're doing a ride down from the hill back here to drink to meet a bunch of people later on, so
I guess so.
I'll let you get prepared for that. Thank you so much for your time.
Hey, well, that's what I'm here for.
It's an absolute honour to meet you. Thanks for... You know, I know you're pretty modest about this, but thanks for all the enjoyment you've given people.
I appreciate that, you know.
And thanks for, thanks for giving us the support. And in my case, in employment for a long time.
Glad to hear it.
So, just to reiterate.
Where is this going to be shown?
That's the book. It's a beauty. As far and wide as I can get it, that's where it's going to be shown, because you deserve the credit, sir.
All right, thank you.
Thanks very much. And thanks to Charlie for organising it. Cheers.